Welcome to day 43, media availability. 3 days left, I think, so we're moving House bills today, and we're down to the final few days and few hours of the session. So why don't we open this up for questions?
So what's happening with the budget?
We're still working with the House, and we're cautiously optimistic. How about that?
Representative Schultz opened a bill file to create a task force to study the ongoing tax problem. Does that break the logjam between the two chambers?
I think that's always been thought of. If you remember the press conference last week we had with the governor, the speaker, and myself, we talked about the fact that we needed to work on tax reform. And this task force, I think, is an effort to try to do that. And so, yes, I think it helps to try to solve this problem we got.
Do you think you'll be able to reach a solution? I mean, their budget that they passed last night offers $400 million less than the budget you proposed. There's a lot of fiscal note bills that are headed over there from the Senate that might die. I mean, are you able to get an agreement, do you think, within the next couple of days?
We're working hard, and we've been talking, and like I said, I'm probably, at this point in time, don't know if I'm cautiously, and I'm not sure optimistic is the right word, but I'm cautiously encouraged, maybe, okay?
Best way to break a log jam is one log at a time.
What else might need to be done to resolve this? We saw the Senate take action last night on a constitutional amendment, kind of a long-term possible solution. The task force is being created over in the House. There's talk of sales tax being put back on food. What else is going to happen for this?
Let's talk about that for a minute. Again, you saw our budget when we rolled it out, the numbers we had. The education fund had, and I can't remember, Senator Stevenson helped me, 300, 400, 500 million of additional money, and even maybe more than that, but the general fund didn't. And so our problem is trying to maintain a tax base for a fund that has, if you graph it over a period of time, is continually declining. And we're trying to find a way to do that. Now, one of the options would be to simply continue to move more education funds over into the general fund, and that's what that constitutional amendment would do. I don't think that's our preference, but I think it's an option. I think the other option is to try to shore up the general fund. And one of those items would be sales tax back on food. Wish Senator Hemmert was here. He's done quite a bit of work on it. But we've looked at sales tax on food, and it would actually bring over $200 million of balance back to our general fund. If it were done with a targeted grocery tax credit, I think there's a way that you could actually help those that sales tax on food was meant to help in a better way, far better way, than by taking the tax off. So let me explain that for a second. Most people in this room probably wouldn't qualify for that grocery tax credit. But we would pay our sales tax on food, and so would the tourists, so would those that are very, very, very wealthy. And then we take that money and target it to those groups that need that help. And that, in doing so, we'd increase that general fund revenue. That could help solve our structural imbalance. So sales tax on food could be one of them. We've heard, lots of different options, and of course, the tax on services. So the task force we mentioned that Senator Schultz has talked about, we'll probably look at all those.
So sales tax would not be something you would try to get through in the last couple of days? Because there was some talk, I guess, of running a bill last night on that.
There's been talk and more talk, okay. So, but Senator Vickers, any comments?
No, I think you've outlined it pretty well. You know, there's a lot of options, a lot of tools, and we need to make sure that we look at all of them. And so we've been talking to the House, and I know that they've been passionate about trying to set up some kind of official process to be able to do that and look at those. And I think we laud that, and we would certainly welcome the opportunity to participate with them.
So it would wait and be studied as part of this overall effort, not something you're going to do between now and Thursday midnight.
Sales tax on food's a big deal.
Yeah.
It needs to be vetted. It's not something that we try and do the last 2 days.
Okay, and they're calling this a task force. Would the idea be that a task force comes up with recommendations, reviewing things like the sales tax back on food, and then makes a recommendation for a special session?
You know, maybe I can help answer that. I don't know, I haven't seen their provisions of what they're proposing, but I've always envisioned the process that we move forward looking at, you know, the tax structure as involving a numerous group of legislators from both sides, tax experts, including the tax commission, maybe a number of tax experts from the community, and then engaging the public in the conversation. So that would be my view, but I don't, you know, hopefully that's the way we go forward.
It'd be an all hands on deck. I think you'd have to have the tax commission, you'd have to have legislators. We saw a lot of business and stakeholders that got involved, citizens. I think the broader we can make it, and as I've mentioned many times through this session, the better information we get, the better decisions we make. And I think the task force, it'd be more than a task force in my opinion. I think there'd also be lots of groups working in subgroups trying to come up with recommendations, because I think that's where you get the best policy. Senator Maine, any comments on this? Minority Party?
I do. Thank you, Mr. President. We have my caucus, the Minority Caucus, where we're all senators. And so we all sit in the same chamber. And some of my senators have worked with the Republican caucus. So they've been meeting with, they've had meetings the last few weeks. So there's consensus and conversation. We have our own budget and we work through that. So as my good companions here, we're just waiting to see what happens, and then we'll go from there. But we've done our job in the Minority Caucus and have worked with the Majority Caucus. So I think we're waiting to see where we're going to go.
What about putting the sales tax back on food? Is that something your caucus would back?
No,
No?
that's something that we had shared it with our we have conversation about everything, but that would be I think somewhere we would not want to go as a caucus.
Senator Hamrick maybe knows numbers on that. Do you have any recollection of what that might do, sales tax back on food?
So if you restore the sales tax back on food to the current state rate of 4.7, so that's not taking into account the 0.15% tax increase due to Medicaid expansion. It's the fiscal analysts tell us it's $227 million of sales tax, which would flow into the general fund. Is that the question you're asking?
Yeah, they asked it earlier.
Yeah.
So you've been running back and forth between chambers all morning. What's going on from your? Have you guys reached an agreement?
So the job of the whip is to run back and forth between the chambers.
And he's doing a good job, isn't he?
At least you get your exercise.
If you've noticed, Schultz has been in our chamber awful lot too, and that's his job as whip. It has to do more with board management than budget negotiations. In fact, there's not been any budget negotiations running back and forth. It's totally had to do with board management. And I heard, so I have a bill that got circled over on the House board, and I heard someone tweeted that that's because of budget negotiations. That wasn't. That was because Schultz was doing his job at whip and was over in the Senate when it came up, and so got circled because he was off the board. Someone asked if they could sit on the floor with me today, and I said, I'm never going to be there, so no. But
We feel really bad for those House members that have asked Senator Hamrick to be their floor sponsor, because all those bills are circled.
So how do you get the sales tax back on food through the House? Because the Senate's long supported this idea, at least the Republicans in the Senate have, but it's always stalled over in the House. Is there any sense that there's a willingness now to consider this, or is this something that is important enough to the Senate? It's
Senator Hamrick.
So So this legislative session, one of the themes has been an identification of a structural imbalance in our funding mechanism. And it has been discussed at length. There was a bill being run, House Bill 441, that sought to solve that structural problem. And I think if you're looking at that solution, which was an expansion of the base into untaxed services, you should be looking at all solutions. And a sales tax on food, it's another solution. You can actually, what's interesting, the sales tax on food, if you structure it, can do the exact same thing that House Bill 441 was doing from a total dollar perspective. You can have 99% of the dollars that House Bill 441 was going to add to the general fund. Sales tax on food can add that same number. So as you're looking, it all depends on what you dislike more. Do you dislike the structural imbalance, and are you willing to fix it with and look at any solution to fix it? Is that your primary issue and concern? Or does sales tax on food trump that? Everything is a decision, and everything's weighing priorities. And so I guess with the House, you'd have to ask what's the bigger priority, the structural imbalance or sales tax on food?
And one of the things sales tax on food does not do is it keeps the same base. Because food is already taxed in some form, in some percentage.
If I could add some.
So it doesn't expand that base like the other did. And the growing base is part of our problem because so go ahead, Senator Vickers.
Well, yeah, I apologize for butting in. I was just going to add that the question how do you get that through the House, I think it's premature because we obviously got to spend some time together talking about all the potential solutions and then come together on what we think is appropriate. So, I think that question is probably a little premature.
Well, the reason I asked is, and I think Senator Hammer, you spoke to this, is this an alternative to taxing services that the Senate is proposing? Because obviously that was difficult and politically unpopular.
So when we were talking about House Bill 441 earlier in the session, it was always asked what's on the table, and I think we always answered anything's on the table, anything and everything's on the table. And I think if we're trying to solve this problem, that's still a response is anything and everything's on the table, and that should be something that's on the table.
But you say it would bring in the same amount of money as 441, so do you not need to expand the base if you do sales tax on food?
As the president identified, one of the things 441 achieved is it moved part of the base into a growing part of our economy that's growing at or even faster than the rest of the economy. Sales tax on food does not achieve that goal, so it doesn't have the exact same outcome. But in the short term, if 441 provided a solution to our structural imbalance, in the short term, this provides the same solution. Or if you're just looking at dollars, you're disregarding everything else. If you're just looking at dollars, you can achieve a similar outcome.
But it doesn't achieve the long-term solution.
Right.
So that's why we're looking at everything. And so
does that give you more flexibility in how you address taxing services? Maybe you phase that in, maybe
sounds like we're going to be looking at all those things. Do you want to be on the task force?
I'll get on
sounds like
I'll take the notes.
Sounds like you may be onto something. Okay.
But I'm guessing that's what you're looking at as a way to make that expanded sales tax base more palatable, and maybe more time, or slowly phasing it in at a lower rate or something might work.
So the answer may not be A, it may not be B, it may not be C, it may not even be D, it may be all the above.
So obviously taxing service is still on the table, but maybe at a slower pace.
I think all the above. Okay.
And what else is that still out there? Sales tax on food is a new shoe today. I don't know how many feet are involved in this, but how many more do we have to drop?
Oh, there's more than that, I'll guarantee you that, okay?
And can you tell us what those are? There's only 2 days left. People might want to weigh in at this point.
Well, if we're going to, I think we'll have lots of time to weigh in as we go through this task force process, okay?
Food refers to groceries, and what's the current rate on those?
1.75 for unprepared food.
And you'd go up to 4.75 then?
Just
4.7.
Pardon me, 4.7. Excluding the Prop 3
Correct.
sales tax imposition, which was 0.15.
Yes.
So then you'd go to 4.7.
Again, the concept would be, and I
85.
actually served 4 years in the House. It seems like a long time ago to me, but it was in the 2002 to 2006 period of time. And during that period of time, I served a couple of years on the round robin tax. I think anyway, if my memory's bad, but I remember the Tax Review Commission doing a study, and the Tax Review Commission is a group of very smart tax experts that are not legislators. And I remember the report that they brought into us, and I was a little bit dumbfounded when they came and said you need to remove the sales tax on food to help the poor and the needy. And I said that goes against everything that I'm hearing out in the public by the advocates. I said, why do you think that happened? Why is that? It's a regressive tax. And they said, well, what happens is when you remove the sales tax from food, you destabilize the general fund. I'm thinking, now I'm hearing that. It's actually happened. And he says you destabilize the general fund, so what happens is when you have swings in the economy, you actually cut those low-income services first because they're the easiest to cut. And they become the most harmed by those swings in that general fund. And they said, plus, those making a ton of money, those millionaires, let's over-exaggerate a little bit, are getting that same benefit as sales tax off of food. And they don't need it. So if you could have them pay it, but then target the help to those that need it, you actually get a better program. And the bells went off, and it actually made sense to me. And plus, you pick up some tourists, you pick up other people, and if you can target the money in either a direct grocery tax credit or some other way, there may be a way to do it and still accomplish what I think the well-meaning effort of trying to take sales tax off of food. So, anyway.
Can you just talk more broadly about how these budget negotiations are throwing a wrench into your final couple of days? I know you have deadlines for passing bills with fiscal notes and things like that.
We're working hard. I think we've got fiscal note bills that we've delivered to the House, and I think they have delivered some to us, have they? I assume. So we're still in that process, and I'll say again that I'm optimistic, somewhat, well, I'm cautiously something, encouraged or optimistic, okay?
Are they gonna? Are these bills that have fiscal notes, Senate bills that go over there? Are they gonna get hurt either today, tomorrow, or what?
We'll know, but in the next day or so. Okay, that's all I know.
Are you caucusing today on these budget negotiations? Are there decisions for your caucus to make?
Senator Vickers, what are we talking about today?
That's a good question, because I've been so busy monitoring other things that, while my good seatmates running back and forth between the Senate and the House, I've been monitoring. I have to
And you
admit,
get stuff to sign.
I have to admit, there's
We
only a
don't
couple
have
things
any
I know.
formal presentations, but I'm sure we'll talk.
You're welcome to check with me afterwards.
So what you know, you're gonna have lunch. That's what you do.
That's
know.
right. We knew all that.
Okay.
Don't know what we're eating though.
That's
Do you?
right.
Any other questions? If not, we're probably going to head to lunch. So
Any
anything else?
plans on executive appropriations tomorrow?
Yeah, Senator Stevens.
You're-
We have a meeting set for tomorrow. That will be number 6. That will actually be number 1, but it'll be number 6. So,
And
Is the
can you
sixth
wrap
time the
everything
charm?
up?
we don't have to have executive appropriations.
Oh,
So that's the good news, and that's not an absolute necessity. It is a great courtesy that we've put together where we all had a chance to sit down and gather together, but it's not something we have to do. So we'll see what happens, but there's no need in going in and not having the defined goal to accomplish is to go through it. So that's the reason we cancel it.
so you can just approve on the floor if
Yeah, we can
you
just
get it
take care of it.
jail
I mean, we can.
time-wise.
The only important thing we need to do is it takes staff roughly 48 hours. That clock will probably start to tick this afternoon about 4 o'clock to prepare the bill of bills. And so we've got to have a pretty good direction on where we're headed right now.
So you need to have this budget impasse solved by 4 o'clock to get
Well,
bill bills.
not
through.
necessarily, but it would certainly help.
So let's stay focused. We talked a lot about what may be separating us, but let's try to stay focused on what brings us together. And I believe, and I don't want to speak for the House, but I believe from talking to them that both bodies are really concerned about this structural problem that we have. And both bodies are committed to try to solve it. And we may go at it from different points of view or from different ways, but we know there's a problem. I think we want to try to solve the problem, and I think unitedly, maybe going at it different, maybe not going the same direction all the time, but unitedly, we're all committed behind that. And I think that's a good message to understand, is that even with some of the differences of procedure, that we are, I think the legislature and the governor's office, from the press conference you could see, are all committed to try to solve this.
What's the number right now? The House wanted to hold back 400 million. What's the number right now, and where's the Senate? on that?
I don't think we're looking at those numbers right now. We're looking at other ones. So, okay, thank you.
What are you looking at,
We're
President?
just looking at every number we can find. Okay.
There's a
Thank you.
13 right there.